All right, welcome back to the Dolphins Country podcast. Today we are joined by JetsCentral, and we will preview our divisional matchup this weekend and talk about the state of both teams right now. So before we get into it, JetsCentral, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's an honor to have you. How's things going?
Yeah, man, everything's good. Everything's good. I mean, obviously the Jets only have 3 wins on the season, which kind of sucks, but to be honest, a lot of us pretty much expected that, right? Year
Right.
one of Aaron Glenn, year one of Darren Muji, quarterback question mark, lots of roster holes. So it is what it is at this point. I mean, really the outlook from here on out is just get as many young player snaps as possible to try to hopefully find solutions, in heading into 2026.
Yeah, no question about it. Before we dive in, be sure to like and subscribe at Dolphins Country Pod on both YouTube and Spotify. Also, link in the bio, we'll see JetsCentral stuff as well if you want to go watch his stuff about the Jets. So we can start off with kind of the state of the team right now. So you can obviously more talk about the Jets side of things. Obviously, you guys had a crazy deadline. I mean, it was a shopping spree in terms of like a fire sale almost. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall stayed, but pretty much everyone else, as far as the cornerstone pieces of the Jets, were headed elsewhere. It was a lot of, we're going to get first-round picks. I think you got 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner. I believe you also got either 1 or 2 for Quinnen Williams. I'm not exactly sure, but I know it was at least 1 first-round pick with the Cowboys. So a kind of a fire sale for the Jets, but, they're still competing. They're still playing hard. I mean, I think they've won, I believe, 3 of their last 5, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the state of the Jets right now, where we stand currently?
Yeah, dude. So, I mean, like you mentioned, the Jets ended up trading Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner, 2 kind of household names for the team for the last couple of seasons, right? And I think the initial, to kind of start from the beginning, a lot of people expected Quinnen to be moved, but not many people saw Gardner being moved, right? He just signed a 5-year extension in the offseason, becoming the highest paid corner in the entire National Football League in NFL history. And so, common sense would tell you, okay, that guy is going to be here for, the remainder of the deal, which was through 2030. So to see him get dealt at the deadline was a bit shocking in that first 30 seconds. I even remember getting the notification from Ian Rappaport, looking down at my phone, and it just said Sauce is a Colt. And I'm like, what now? What is going on?
Yeah.
And then a minute later, the compensation came out and it was 2 first-round picks plus more. And I'm like, 2 first-round picks is absolutely insane. I will take that every single day of the week.
Yes.
And then I think it was about 10 or 15 minutes after that, we got news that it was wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, who a lot of Jets fans were looking at in the draft as a potential option. But, that year we didn't have a second-round pick. Joe Douglas ultimately traded up in the draft to select Malachi Corley, which obviously didn't work out. But, I mean, 2 first-rounders and A.D. Mitchell.
It's a haul.
For Sauce Gardner. I mean, you got to do that every single day of the week. I mean, look at what Micah Parsons went for, right? 2 firsts and Kenny Clark.
Right.
The difference, the caliber of player between Sauce and Micah is obviously huge. So
yeah, and he's a pass rusher too. That's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was thrilled, right? And also too, if you're really trying to find bright spots, now the Jets don't have to pay Sauce Gardner, whatever it was, the $25-26 million per season. So we're saving a lot of money there moving forward. And then Quinnen, like you mentioned, we traded him, acquired a 2027 first, a 2026 second, and then we added Mozzie Smith. So we'll see what happens there. But overall, the Jets have been losing a bunch of games, but I think right now we haven't really missed a beat with those guys gone. It's not like the Jets defense completely fell off a cliff or anything. So that's really, really impressive. We're playing better ball now than we were compared to September, October, which I think is pretty standard when it comes to year one head coaches, right? As the season goes on, players get more kind of ingrained in the system. And, again, despite the team losing, it's been fun watching, right? I was just so tired of the Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, Joe Douglas era, the Aaron Rodgers era. I was just so done with it, and I was ready to move on. And again, we have a lot of roster holes, but and we're losing. But I still love watching this team on Sundays. I'm always looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I don't think losing is necessarily the worst thing in the world right now. Obviously, you want to win the games, of course. You want to see good football, and that's all. I'm obviously rooting for good football as well. But we're kind of stuck in this cycle. We did not full fire sale, by the way. I mean, I think when the trade deadline happened, I believe you guys were either 0-6 or 1-6, and we were not much better. I think we were 1-5 or 1-6, maybe 2-6. I figured we might go in the same direction as you guys. Maybe not fire sale everybody, but it felt like the end of this era of the Tua McDaniel marriage, We did trade off Jaelan Phillips, which made and he was a young guy. He was one that we were going to probably about to pay. And we did get a comp third for him. So if you're not going to pay him, I guess they got something for him. But I figured maybe that was the start of something, not the end of something. They didn't end up trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, despite apparently there was calls from Dallas. They did not end up trading Bradley Chubb. Apparently there was some calls from San Francisco. They need pass rushers, obviously, without Bosa and all the other guys. They didn't really do a fire sale like the Jets did. So I was like, okay, are they still going to go for this? I mean, they're 2-6. There's no way they actually think they're going to make the playoffs. Then they were 2-7. Now we've won 3 in a row, and I don't really know. I mean, I don't know where you think about the Dolphins right now. It feels like we're kind of stuck in this cycle of we still beat the bad teams more or less, even though we did lose to Cleveland this year. But in recent years, we've been kind of hammering the bad teams. I mean, the whole thing with Tua and McDaniel in their time here is they've taken care of the bad teams, specifically at home. But these last 2 games, they're on a 3-game winning streak. The last 2 wins they've beaten bad teams, but not very impressively. The game in Madrid against Washington that I had to wake up for, it was 16-13. They couldn't score an offensive touchdown for what felt like 3 hours. And then last week against the Saints, it was a very uninspiring. They held on. They got a pick 2, which kind of won them the game with Minkah Fitzpatrick on the 100-yard pick 2 on Tyler Shuck. So they're still beating the bad teams at home, but they're not really doing it like they used to. And it feels like to me this is kind of like the end of this era. And again, they've won 3 in a row. If they can run the table, I don't think they're good enough to win 8 games in a row. But they are still technically alive for the playoffs. But it feels like we get this every year where the Dolphins are in the hunt graphic. They're not bad enough to bottom out, which I think is the big thing here. The Jets, I do believe, especially with them trading off their franchise cornerstones more or less, they could theoretically bottom out and get another top 5 pick. I don't think the Dolphins roster is bad enough to be a bottom out roster. Like you see, the Giants are going to pick in the top 5 again. The Titans are going to pick in the top 5 again. The Saints are going to pick, pretty high again. Browns, those teams are generally always picking in the top 10. I don't think the Dolphins roster is bad enough to get them that high in the draft and really get a franchise, a blue chipper, because there's obviously great players throughout the draft. But if you pick top 5, you're pretty much heightening your chances of getting a blue chip prospect, which I just don't think the Dolphins are bad enough to finish in the top 5. And again, they've won 2 games in a row. They could obviously beat the Jets this Sunday and make it 6-7, and maybe who knows. But to me, it feels like this is just like a hamster wheel of like, okay, we're not good enough to make the playoffs, really, but we're also not bad enough to bottom out, and we're stuck in this kind of what do we do territory. What do you think about the Dolphins and Jets this week, and what do you think the Dolphins could or maybe should do heading into the offseason?
Yeah, man. I mean, to be honest, like when I'm purely looking at the Dolphins as an outsider, right? And I grew up in South Florida, so I have a lot of friends that are Dolphins fans.
Right.
It's actually how we met. Funny
exactly
enough.
right. Exactly how we met. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was stunned to see Miami hang on to some of these players. And granted, I don't really know the ins and outs of every single contract and everything, but Minkah Fitz, Bradley Chubb, I agreed with hanging on to Waddle, because that is just a piece that I feel like it's kind of pointless to move.
Yeah,
because you're just gonna have to replace him. But there's a couple guys on that roster where I'm like, oh, why do the Dolphins hang on to them? Even if you're getting 3rd round, 4th round picks, you're clearing money and you're just stockpiling draft assets. And as we all know, the quickest way out of the rebuild is to build through the draft.
Yeah.
It's not to go all in free agency or trade 5 firsts and land 1 superstar player. It's to hit on these picks. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I'm still a little shocked by it, right?
Yeah.
But
well, to go to your Waddle point real quick, I would only trade Waddle if it was one of those things where Sauce Gardner went for a haul. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to move off a cornerstone piece, unless if it's like an offer you can't refuse, which I did not think an offer like that was out there anyways. So I totally agree. Hold on to Waddle unless you get an offer that just blows your socks off, like the Sauce Gardner one. Of course, that value there is too important to trade. You got to get 2 first-round picks for a corner, obviously. The other ones, I totally agree. Minkah and Bradley Chubb, it almost felt like, well, what are they still doing here? We're 2-7 at the time. We were 2-7. It's like, why are they? It feels like they could actually help maybe a fringe contender, and we can benefit by getting draft capital out of it. And it came on the heels. I believe Chris Greer, our GM, got fired like 4 days before the trade deadline. So it's kind of a tough spot for the interim GM, Champ Kelly. So again, he wasn't able to completely fire still. He did get Jaelan Phillips traded to Philadelphia, but he was not able to trade, the older guys. And like you said, the reason why you do it is not just because, they're not really helping you win right now. Is also because, well, again, we're not winning with them, but also you clear cap space. It's an expensive, older roster, which is the big thing here. If you're like, the only guy they traded was Jaelan Phillips, who's 24. So they didn't trade the older guys who are making a lot of money. I don't believe Tyreek Hill will be back. And again, this could be the end of Bradley Chubb as well here, but we didn't get anything for them, which is the big thing there. which I actually do agree with. I think that's, if you wanted to go do like a soft sale, not a totally fire sale, but if you wanted to sell some parts, those would have been the guys I figured, and not even as an outsider, that's just what I figured they would have done, and they didn't. So that was really surprising to me.
Yeah, dude. And like another thing too, it's like, and you make a good point about the interim GM Kelly.
Didn't have much time. Yeah.
Quick question: is he actually like in consideration to take over full time, or is it just get through the season?
That I honestly, I have no idea. I don't know if that's a rip the interim tag off. I do believe they're going to have a search out for, the GM candidates. They're looking at other front offices. I would assume they're going to do their due diligence there. And again, I think he is well liked in the room, so maybe he still would be here, but not as an actual GM. I don't know. Right now he's just the acting GM, so I really have no idea. Stephen Ross has kept it very under the wraps. I know he liked Chris Greer. I know he really likes Mike McDaniel, and I think he really likes everyone in the front office. So I don't think he really wants to fire anybody. That's why the Chris Greer thing was kind of surprising at the time, because it was like, wow, because he could have fired him, a little bit before this, but he just didn't. So that one I really don't know. That's anyone's guess. I would like for them to put out a search, like everyone does. They've gotten out ahead of it now, and just find the best guy for the job. Because now, if you're able to they do have 3 third-round picks. So whoever the next GM is has some draft capital in day 2, where there is some meat and potatoes still left in that draft.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to just spin it in my head, like how it could possibly make sense. I mean, maybe Kelly is thinking, okay, well, when I officially become interim GM, like my record will be better, so I do kind of want to hang on to some vets.
Yeah, maybe.
Quick question: is Minka? Are these guys under contract for next season?
I think Bradley Chubb, this is it for him. I believe that there was an out. I believe there was an out before this season, but they decided to bring him back because they wanted to run this thing back as a team. Obviously, Tua had a lot of injuries last year, so they were like, okay. They didn't trade Tyreek Hill either, remember? So Tyreek Hill was one that they were like, okay, we could move off of him. Remember, he, at the end of the season last year, kind of melted down and wanted out. They held on to him because they believed that we're still good enough to win, and they held on to Bradley Chubb despite possibly being able to trade him. Obviously, though, Chubb was injured, so it would have been tough to trade him then because he was coming off an injury. So they held on to him because there wasn't like much reason to trade him at that point. Now, the deadline is gone, so I believe at this point it might just be one of those things where they just don't bring him back next year. That would be my guess. But shifting over to Tua, Tua's undefeated against the Jets. It's a little bit weird because we've lost to the Jets a few times since Tua's been here, but it's been with Bridgewater, Skylar Thompson. Last year, I believe we lost it with Tyler Huntley, who went into MetLife. So Tua doesn't always play against the Jets. He's not always healthy for these games, but he hasn't ever lost to the Jets. What do you attribute that to? Is he just sharper against the Jets? As a Jets fan, are you watching it? Have the Jets just not been maybe the most competitive team since he's entered the league? That could also be attributed to it. What do you think it is when Tua plays against the Jets specifically?
So I got to be honest. I think it's when you look at the solid defense, because we've only had the one game with Aaron Glenn, and that was so early on in the year. I think it was week 4.
Right, it was week 4.
Yeah, and so I that game earlier this season, the Jets played just terribly. Right, just 13 penalties, over 100 yards given up, 3 turnovers.
3 turnovers. Well.
Yep. Yeah, just terrible. So this year, I'm not really so, I don't really feel as confident with what I'm about to say, but in previous years, right, when it was Saleh and Ulbrich running the show, I just feel like Mike McDaniel's offense gives that style of defense, that like defensive scheme, a ton of problems. You look at Tua, when he's on, back foot hits, the ball's out. He's throwing accurate passes over the middle of the field. He just, anytime Saleh played the Miami Dolphins and Tua was healthy, it was difficult. And, it didn't matter who the Jets had on our side. It didn't matter who was healthy, who was, who's injured, who's playing quarterback, right? Because we lost with Zach Wilson. We lost with other, multiple other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And Saleh was just owned by McDaniel. And so I do think it's whenever you're seeing something that consistent, I just feel like the scheme has got to come into play.
Yeah.
And if you look at like Jeff Ulbrich this season, he's the Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator.
We played him earlier.
Did Tua play in that game?
He did. I was actually at that game. I drove down to Atlanta and watched it.
No way.
It was his best game of the season, easily. It looked like he was back in college at Alabama. He was just straight in the middle of the field. Anticipation, ball was coming out right as the back foot hit. It was like, oh my God, that's old Tua. And we haven't really gotten old Tua this year. And I'm a big Tua guy, but he's been a little bit, he's regressed. I can say that confidently. He hasn't been seeing the field as well as he normally does. And he's been playing a little bit more reckless. I don't know if that's not in terms of like he's actively seeking contact and getting hit. I'm saying he's actually, the decision making is a little bit more reckless than it normally is. Usually he's a little bit safer with the football. He's been throwing things that aren't really there. Not that the throws are there, he's just not making them. It's that the throws really aren't there, but he's throwing them anyway. So he's had a few of these games where he's turned the ball over where it's like, okay, that one really didn't need to throw that. But yeah, in years past, he was very safe with the football. And against the Jets, he would always play some of his better games. I mean, I think he had the one game in 23. It was coming off the Monday night collapse against Tennessee. Tyreek Hill was injured and did not play in that game. And that was the year where Tyreek Hill was chasing 2,000 yards, the whole thing. And I think Tua put up like his best game of the season. They won 30-0. Waddle had 2 deep balls. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the best Tua we've seen all season. And that was the year we put up 70 points against Denver. So it was like, okay, so Tua can do this without Tyreek. But it does seem like a scheme thing. And it's funny you mentioned Saleh and McDaniel. Both of those guys were in San Francisco as offensive and defensive coordinators during that Shanahan run to the Super Bowl, I believe, in 2020, and then also to the NFC Championship the year after that. So it is kind of funny that maybe it's just a McDaniel over Saleh thing and a McDaniel over Ulbrich thing. And yeah, it does feel like this year the offense isn't as explosive for Miami. Obviously, it's also a different offense. They're slowly shifting their identity from. And that's the last 3 wins you've seen this. Tua is throwing the ball less, and they're winning games. So they're actually taking the ball out of his hands a little bit, and they're establishing more of we're a Devon Achane run game team. That's what we are this season. We're going to run the football, and they're doing a lot of things with like 6 O-line formations, using Dan Brunskill as an extra offensive lineman. They have Austin Jackson back. So they're going to be like a run-first football team now. I wonder if that's any different than what we've seen in years past, where they're more of a flashy, speed, deep ball team, intermediate, middle of the field team. So I am interested to see how that plays out. And again, the Monday night game week 4 was such a tough tell because it was more the Jets just kept turning the ball over and making mistakes, and the Dolphins were just capitalizing off mistakes. I don't think it was more like the Dolphins were significantly better. It was just more like the Jets lost by 6 points and they turned the ball over 3 times. So it was a close game. It was just one of those games where the Jets kept making mistakes. They had penalties all over the place. And the Dolphins were able to get up some like key 4th down stops as well. But yeah, I don't know if it's specifically Tua. It may just very well be a McDaniel Tua over Saleh Ulbrich thing. And again, now it's like the Jets don't have Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams. So maybe it's a little bit easier, obviously. But I think it's a good point that you made there.
Yeah, so this weekend should be interesting, right? Here's a question I have for you, because this is like one of the, at least amongst Jets fans, this is what we're always talking about when it comes to Miami,
right?
Not for the same reason, but you kind of feel like Miami, once the season starts to, these games start to mean a little bit more, right? We get into December, January, the weather cools down, they just implode.
Yep.
They start off fast and then they implode. How big of the cold factor, like, is that real? Because I know fans from the outside, they're always like, oh yeah, once it gets cold, Miami's just gonna fall apart. Is it that, or is it because my mindset was always, maybe that plays a little bit of a part in it, but I always kind of thought McDaniel like schemes well in the offseason, and he's coming up with different ways to get players to football, how to attack defenses. But then as the season goes on, he almost like not necessarily runs out of ideas, but it's like the defenses start catching up to him. And I don't know, McDaniel's always kind of came off like a mad scientist.
He's a sharp guy. Yeah, he's a very sharp guy.
He wants to like concoct plays and really dive into all that kind of stuff. But then as the season again goes on, it's just like they just feel like they're out of ideas and they just kind of are stifled, I guess.
I think it is maybe a little bit of both. I think that's a good point. I do think the cold weather thing is real, not necessarily because they're from Miami and they're a soft team. I think it's the way the roster is built. It's a soft team. Because I watched Brian Flores go into New England and beat them in January. I've seen it happen before. I've seen the Dolphins go on the road and win in cold weather stadiums before. I've seen them win in MetLife in late December in 2016 with Adam Gase. So I've seen it's possible, and I think it's the way the roster's built. So my whole issue with this, and I think that's the reason why I expect every year whenever I see a cold weather game late in the season against a good football team, I'm expecting a loss. The reason is because the roster is not built for cold weather. So the money that's allocated on this roster, at least the last few years, it's skill players. It's Tyreek Hill's making a lot of money. It's Jalen Ramsey making a lot of money. It's Tua making a lot of money now, obviously. Waddle extension just kicked in. So it's not necessarily like the money, where the money is are placed in all the things that don't win in January football. So what wins in January football are run game and pass rush, which they haven't had in either of their playoff runs. So in the playoff run against Kansas City, in like the coldest game ever besides the Ice Bowl, they didn't have any pass rushers. That was the year where Phillips tore his Achilles against the Jets. That was the year where Bradley Chubb tore his ACL, and they didn't have any depth behind us. They had Van Ginkel, but he also got hurt that season. So it was like they didn't have the depth at pass rusher, and the O-line was Teron Armstead on his last legs, and he's incredible, but he was an older guy, and it was no one else really on that offensive line that they kind of prioritized. So it was a very skill heavy offense, and that did not translate well to January football, where it's like negative 10 degrees. That's just not how they're built to play. And then obviously last year, because you pay the quarterback Tua, and I was fine with doing it. So I'm not going to be like revisionist history guy. I think Tua played well enough to earn the contract, but by doing that, you then can't keep the awesome players on your team. So they let Robert Hunt walk, who was like their best guard. And I still think Robert Hunt, that was a big mistake, letting him walk to Carolina in free agency. They did not keep Christian Wilkins because they let him walk. That was out of their price range because they had to prioritize Waddle's extension and Tua's extension. And they wanted to keep Ramsey happy and they want to keep Tyreek Hill happy. Those are all skill guys. Those are not going to get you wins in January. The guys who are going to get you wins in January are the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen and the running game. And they didn't really prioritize that. And that's why I believe when the weather gets colder, they struggle. And I think they could literally be a Detroit Lions team if they wanted to. I believe Goff and Tua have a lot of similarities. If they really wanted to build a roster that is conducive to January football, they could have. They just didn't spend the money in the right areas. So when they did their shopping spree in free agency, when they traded for Jalen Ramsey, that was flashy. When they traded for Tyreek Hill, that was flashy, and they were good moves. But did they really help us win in January? Not really. And that's why I liked when you guys did, which is trade a cornerback, albeit a great cornerback, for 2 first-round picks. I don't think a cornerback necessarily is going to take you above, maybe the Colts believe that, but unless it's like a Patrick Surtain, I don't know if they're 2 first-round picks worth it. So in my opinion, if the Dolphins really wanted to build a roster the right way, you build it inside out, and you trade the flashy skill players before, obviously, the other side of 30 years old, there's not as much worth for them anymore because there's so much good skill guys coming in the draft. As you know, there's really no need to have these skill players past 30. That's kind of harsh to say, but corners past 30, there's not a very long life on that position. Wide receivers past 30. I mean, Tyreek Hill's big thing is speed. I don't know. I mean, you can find speed guys in the draft that are not Tyreek Hill, obviously, but you can replace skill guys easier than you can replace these blue chip foundation offensive linemen, which I don't think you can find a Robert Hunt in the draft again. They kind of struck gold on that one, and they have not been able to replicate that in the draft recently. So I think that's the big issue here. I do believe what you said about McDaniel is legit, but I also think when the weather gets colder, what wins in football? It's not the way the Dolphins have built their roster, which is, I think, why you see a little bit of that mishaps down the stretch in the season.
Yeah, and that's actually why I was a big fan of the Dolphins drafting Kenneth Grant. I know a lot of people looked at it as like, oh, they're reaching and stuff, but I just feel like Miami really needs to invest in the trenches, not just, sign like an older, high-priced guy.
Play as Campbell, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes for both sides, right? Offensive line and defensive line. Like it was just nice, just putting my Jet fandom aside for a sec. It was just nice seeing Miami just say, screw it, let's go D tackle, right?
Yeah.
A high upside, athletic freak D tackle. Let's actually, invest in that position. And then what was it in round 2? They went with Savania, right? From
Savania, yes, the guard out of Arizona. Yep. Yes. So they went to Miami.
Worked.
It's been a rough season. I think the technique's been a bit of an issue there. But again, it's like with rookies, you kind of have to just play it out. You don't want to freak out immediately. Now, again, Greer has had a bit of a blind spot for offensive line specifically. So, again, it's very well that he just doesn't know the position. But I liked Savania in college, so I'm not going to just, again, be a revisionist history guy. And Kenneth Grant, like you mentioned, that's a guy from Michigan. It's a high upside pick. So, again, he's playing behind Zach Sealer and those guys right now. But right now he's a rotation guy. And they did the same thing a few years ago with Christian Wilkins. They drafted him at 13th overall. And I think Wilkins was supposed to go like 18, 17. They took him a little bit higher than people thought. But it worked out. So I'm not going to write off the Kenneth Grant pick by any means. But shifting to the Jets now, do you think, like, what are some matchups to look forward to of this game, and how do you see it going as far as from the Jets' perspective?
Yeah, so, only 3 wins on the season, but we are coming off of a win against Atlanta.
Yep.
And, really, I think the name of the game here is the Jets are in. I mean, you can even pick it up if you listen to like pressers and, if you're listening to like even some of the player pressers, like there's a pretty big emphasis on let's get young guys involved, even if there's a drop, even if there's maybe a bust in coverage, whatever, we're just going to live with it. And we're just going to get these guys as much experience, as much tape as possible. So hopefully they can grow, learn, and then move forward with it in 2026. Like, we're trying to find options here. And one of my favorite things about Darren Muji, the Jets new general manager who just took over this season, he's done a really, really, really good job of acquiring like these random young players that maybe haven't worked out in their, or maybe they have, but they're just like small, like little rotation pieces. They don't really, get in the game all that much. but they're coming over to the Jets in like huge positions of need. So they're just, they're going from such little volume to a ton of it. And the
Yep.
Jets are like, hey, we're going to, you weren't really involved in the passing attack. You weren't really asked to do much with said team, but with us from here on out, you're going to be getting thrown the football a lot. You're going to be rushing the passer a lot, compared to what you were previously doing.
Yeah.
And that I think has been awesome because all these guys outside of Mozzie Smith have been great. If you look at, again, A.D. Mitchell, he had the
John
best game of his
Mechie.
yeah,
John,
A.D.
really
Mitchell,
good.
John Mechie. It's another one. He had a couple drops in against the Falcons, but if you
Yeah.
go back the week before against New England, he had a coming out party. Like he was awesome, right?
It's a big game. Yeah. Big game.
Yeah. Yep. And I think he had 2 touchdowns in that game. And then last week, again, Mitchell had over 100 yards with a long touchdown. Both games, just these 2 back-to-back weeks, it was Mechie's best game of his entire career and Mitchell's best game of his entire career. And then you look at a guy in Jarvis Brown-Lee, who they picked up from the Tennessee Titans for a late round pick swap. And a lot of Titans fans at the time were like, why are we doing this? Like, this makes no sense. And then, Jets fans are like, okay, awesome. We'll take this, cool young player year 2, on his rookie deal, who fits the system, plays a lot of bump and run man coverage. And he's just like a tough, gritty player. And he comes in, immediately hits the scene and is just producing like crazy. That's ultimately why we traded Michael Carter.
Yeah,
because we already had we already had his replacement, and he was super, super cheap and performing better at least. So Brownlee was awesome. And then we also added Jaelan Briggs before the season too. He's a rotational tackle in Cleveland. Again, much like Brownlee's second year of his rookie deal, he's been one of the better like rotational defensive tackles in football, and he's still so young. He's under 25 years old. So I think of course, that goes along with Armand Membu, who was our top 10 pick, Mason Taylor.
Big fan of Membu, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember there were a lot of Dolphins fans that were pushing for Membu like pre-draft.
Yeah. I was one of them. I wanted him bad. And
Okay.
I was like,
yeah,
man, I watched Membu stuff at Missouri. I was like, man, that would be perfect. But that was a good pick by the Jets. I do want to get back to your point though about the like how do you view like trading rookies after one or 2 years, like giving up on them almost in their rookie contract? I mean, that's a legit thing. It almost feels like Moogie is like playing. He's at the blackjack table, but he's like, he's getting these like really good values, or not the blackjack table, but he's like making good value trades for guys who maybe didn't fit, or maybe they were buried at the depth chart and they're on their teams that drafted them. But it's like, hey, we need them. We need this position really bad. Maybe we can go out and get them, and maybe they're still talented. I mean, they went, they were drafted by these teams, and they're going to be giving up on them after like a year and a half. So with Brownlee's case, and I know obviously with A.D. Mitchell's case, I mean, he was just drafted 2 years ago, and the Colts already said see you later. So yeah, where is your view on like, do you like make a trade because this rookie hasn't panned out in a year and a half, or because you just don't need the position and you want to get value and get picks out of it again? Where do you kind of land on that?
I personally love the acquisition of these young players because, again, the Jets are a team that doesn't have a lot of talent. If you want to take a swing on maybe a former first-round pick, if you want to take a swing on someone that you liked in the draft but you couldn't land him, right? And to be fair, Muji was with Denver at the time,
right?
But like if you're, let's just use a Madden perspective, right? If you're looking at the depth chart, let's just call it at wide receiver, and your top guy is Garrett Wilson, but behind Garrett, you have like a bunch of guys rated in like the 60s, and you have, someone in Adonai Mitchell or John Mechie who clearly they have talent. Clearly they're young enough to get better. I think it's ridiculous to say, oh, Mitchell's, his potential is tapped out at 23 years old. It makes no sense.
No.
And then you look at the situations, right? Mitchell in Indy, he was playing behind Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, and they just drafted Tyler Warren, and they're a run first team anyway.
Yeah, and by the way, last year the Colts had issues throwing the ball to I think everyone had down years for the Colts last year. That was the year, like every Colts game last year was like running the ball 30 times a game. Richardson didn't have many completions, in general, so that maybe just wasn't a good fit for Adonai Mitchell there. I mean, obviously this year they have Daniel Jones and they're throwing the ball all over the yard, but they're also just a Jonathan Taylor offense still. I mean, then again, Tyler Warren helps open all that stuff up. But yeah, maybe that just wasn't a good fit. Mechie was buried behind, the Nico Collinses of the world, the Tank Dells of the world, and Houston maybe just wasn't a good fit there.
Yeah, and then he was also on Philly, and he's not going to get in the game there either. No so way. It's kind of like that cool approach where it's just like, hey, we don't have any wide receivers. And then Jaelan Briggs too, D tackle from Cleveland, like he was buried on the depth chart there. Mason Graham was a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
So it was like, come over to, our squad where we don't have the talent, and you're going to be walking in as like one of the guys, and we're not going to kill you if you make a mistake. Like, we just don't have the talent. You're going from a situation where you're like wide receiver 4, DT 4 to, like an actual contributing piece. In other words, like, we're setting the stage for, for some of these young players to take the range, like, to take the reins, but they have to actually go out and prove it. But you're not like, how are they going to prove it if they don't get thrown the ball, if they don't have an opportunity to rush the passer or stop the run? The Jets are given that opportunity. So, I hate to almost kind of give you this like grayish, blurry answer, but really, like, the game plan for this week is we're just going to continue to feed the young guys. If they make mistakes and they drop a bunch of passes, it is what it is. They're just going to continue to feed them.
Yeah.
Right. Mason Taylor's another one. Jason Taylor's son.
Big fan of Mason Taylor.
He's only 21 years old. So of course there's going to be some drops and some mistakes. He doesn't have it all figured out, but
right.
The Jets the ship has sailed with them going down with the veterans, the Josh Reynolds, the Alan Lazards. Tyrod Taylor's a veteran, but he's just kind of being brought in so they can kind of evaluate everybody. So, just I expect a lot of young players.
Yeah, so I was going to finish with this. So what's the overall the mindset for the rest of the season? Obviously, the young players for sure. Are you already looking? Because I have a Jets buddy who's already looking at like mock drafts. He's already looking at free agents, who's going to be on the market, who's going to be high draft picks, who's coming out of college, who's staying in college. Are you already looking at 3-9? This is if the Dolphins are 3-9, because I believe we were one. It was the tank for 2 a year. I was already doing like mock drafts at 3-9. So at 5-7, I guess I have to hold off for a few more weeks. But where you guys are at right now, are you already looking toward the offseason, or are you more specifically still focused on, okay, are these young guys, are they getting better? Are they going to be here next year? Because they're kind of playing for, their second contracts, if you will. They're playing to kind of stay in the league because they've been cast aside by other teams right now. So this is a big showing out for them. But are you already looking as like, okay, if we're still, do we need to improve these positions? And are we looking to do that already here in the offseason? Are you looking that far ahead? Or are you still looking at these last 6 games?
Yeah, to be honest, both. I'm time's going to go on, right? The offseason is going to hit, and I think it's important to kind of prepare and try to figure out which prospects make sense, scheme fit, skill set fit, all just everything, right? Culture fit, right? Aaron Glenn's a big culture guy. Yeah. That wasn't really there under Saleh and co. But in the meantime, we have a bunch of new young players added to the squad, and it's just like, hey, maybe the wide receiver need, the defensive tackle need isn't going to be as big if 1 or 2 of these guys work out, or hopefully all of them work out, compared to us not doing anything at the deadline or not making some of these pick swap types of trades, and us just saying, okay, well,
we'll address it in April.
We got to hit the offseason and sign 2 edge rushers, 3 defensive tackles, 4 wide receivers. It's just, it's just unrealistic, so it's like take shots on, and also it's not like they're taking on $90 million contracts here. It's just cheap rookie deals. And for whatever reason, better, worse, whatever, they just didn't work out in their first spot. So again, in the meantime, it's like, hey, 5 games left. Here's a ton of volume. Try to make the most out of it. And then hopefully, as we get into January, we should have a clearer picture on what are the big needs, like quarterback and edge rusher. And I would say free safety are probably the team's 3 biggest needs right now. But it's like, you look at the team before the trade deadline. Yeah, it was Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Tyler Johnson, Josh Reynolds. That was the wide receiving core, and that was, and Garrett Wilson's hurt, so it's like it was awful. But because we added 2 young guys to the mix, it's like, whoa, maybe they can get a little bit better. Maybe they can actually be an option for us moving forward. So now we don't have to sign again 3 wide receivers and be pressured into drafting one in the first round if we don't really want that guy. We just like him, but it's just like, great, we have 1 person on the depth chart, might as well just, we're forced into taking them. So
exactly.
I think, of course, the focus is always going to be on the offseason, adding talent and stuff. But, in the meantime, let's see what these young guys can do.
Yeah, I think for Miami, it's more, does McDaniel keep his job? Because I'm also kind of looking ahead a little bit, although I'm still trying to stay on these last 5-6 games as well. Because right now we don't have a GM. We have an acting GM, like I said, with Champ Kelly, but we have to address that. on the first few weeks of the offseason, get a GM in here so we can actually make these moves and address the roster. Tyreek Hill looks like his time's coming to an end. So how do they replace some of these older guys who are not going to be there anymore? That I'm interested to see. The Tua McDaniel marriage, I feel like I've watched the peak of it. And again, I'm a fan of both of them, so I'm not advocating for them to just split up. But I think I've seen the best version of it. Not because I don't believe in either one of them. It's because when you pay a quarterback, unfortunately, you can't keep this awesome roster that you had the first 2 years in 22 and 23. So it felt like that was the window. And windows are very small in this league, as we know. So I want to see if they do split that marriage up. The Tua, you can't really, there's not an out in the Tua contract until after next season. So I do wonder if they just keep him, hold on to him like the Falcons did with Kirk. And maybe they still do draft. I don't know. There's a lot of more. I feel like there's a lot more question marks for the Dolphins. The Jets, I feel like they know what they're doing. They know where they're headed. The Dolphins are like kind of stuck in like, are we still good enough to compete, or are we gonna maybe blow this thing up? I don't know. And split up the marriage. So that would be the biggest thing I'm interested in for the rest of the season, and obviously for the offseason if we're just looking ahead and taking a wider scope of this thing. But yeah, those things, McDaniel and Tua, how does this thing end? How do these last 5 games look? Because that could also determine it. If it falls apart at the end in January, we have a game at New England in January. We have a game in Pittsburgh in 2 weeks. So those cold weather games, like we talked about earlier, could dictate whether we like just stop with this whole thing and maybe go in a different direction. So that will be very interesting. We'll close on this. What are our score predictions for or just our overall predictions for the game? Like, who do we like to win the game? What should we expect to see?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the Jets, man. Just when I go back and look at just that first matchup, it was in Miami. It was Glenn's first like big primetime game. I mean, we gave up a free football field in penalty yardage alone.
It's insane.
Then you throw on top of it 3 turnovers.
Yeah,
and we lost by 6. We're playing better football as of late. I'm assuming that those numbers are going to be cut down. Like the penalty yardage and the turnovers and whatnot. Tyrod, I think can just come in and just stabilize, right? Not do anything too crazy, not win you the game, but he's not losing you the game. Just hit the open guy, really. Whereas with Justin Fields, it's just too much of a roller coaster. So in this one, I got the Jets. I don't know what the weather is looking like. I know last week in MetLife, it was just a downpour. It was freezing cold. But I think the Jets, we have potential to put up, 25 plus points in this one.
Yeah, no, if the weather is like it was last week, I would definitely favor the Jets because I mean, I've seen this offense in that weather and it just doesn't look good. Again, they have been running the football very, very well the last few weeks. The explosive plays that they're getting are all Devon Achane runs. So if it is a run first game, they're kind of built for that a little bit right now, at least the way they're playing right now. Tyrod's always given us some problems though. He's always given the Dolphins issues. Again, now he's a little bit older. I'm not confident in it, but I guess I'll say the Dolphins just because of the way they're playing the last few weeks. It's not impressive wins, but they won 3 in a row. The Buffalo game was very impressive. It feels like they need it a little bit more than the Jets do. The Jets, it feels like they want to play good football, obviously, and they want to see what the young guys have, but they are 3-9. The Dolphins still kind of have a chance, I guess. I mean, not really. As a matter of fact, they could actually win out and not make the playoffs because they don't have tiebreakers with anybody. They don't have tiebreakers.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because the thing is, they can go 10-7, but if you look at the AFC, the Chargers are going to get to 10-7 probably. The Chargers beat us head to head. The Bills are probably going to get to 10 wins. The Colts are going to get to probably 10 wins. They beat us in week 1. So they don't really have tiebreakers with much of the teams there. Baltimore, they don't have a tiebreaker with them either. So they've lost to all these AFC teams that are kind of in the mix. So, I mean, they play Pittsburgh here in a couple of weeks. So maybe, but that's even another one. That's only a one bid division. Like that's not a wild card. They have to get to a wild card because obviously New England has locked up our division. As we know, they're 11-2. So the Dolphins have to pretty much run the table and get a miracle. And they could easily lose to the Jets. I mean, it's very possible that they're only 2-point favorites. So, I mean, I don't say this with any confidence, but I guess I'll take the Dolphins because I think that they just have a little bit more talent right now. And I think that McDaniel's coaching for his job. So I think that desperation coupled with, they need it. Achane's playing really well. They're getting Austin Jackson back. And when he's back, the run game's always better. So maybe they'll lean on that and get the win in an ugly game. I feel like it'll be an ugly game. I feel like it'll be low scoring, maybe 24-20. Not necessarily low scoring, but I feel like it'll be a go either way game, I think. So that should be interesting. But overall, thanks for hopping on this podcast with us today, JetsCentral. And again, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. Hopefully
dude, of course, man. This was great. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, maybe we can do it again. I mean, the Jets Dolphins games over the years have been, they've been fun. Again, you guys got us last year in week 18. We got you guys in the overtime game, I think a couple weeks before that. Hopefully the game is good. I know it's been a rough season for both of our teams right now. We're probably going to watch Buffalo and New England run this division, at least for this year and maybe a couple years later. But overall, I hope it's a solid game. And once again, thank you for hopping on the podcast and talking some ball with us today.
Yeah, dude. Of course. Definitely should. We gotta link up again, man. This was fun.
100%. All right. Awesome, man. I'll see you.
Cool. Peace.